My name is Elena Mercer, and I was 36 years old when my brother raised his glass at our family's New Year's Eve dinner and announced that I had finally become useful. He did not use those exact words. People like Grant rarely say the cruelest thing plainly. They wrap it in humor so everyone else can laugh without feeling guilty. To Elena, he said, smiling across the candlelit table, proof that you can avoid marriage, children, and every normal responsibility and still get invited home for the holidays. My father laughed first. My aunt nearly spilled her champagne. Grant's wife covered her mouth, pretending she was trying not to smile. My mother gave me the apologetic look she had perfected over 30 years. "He's teasing," she said. "You know how your brother is." I knew exactly how my brother was. I also knew something no one else at that table did. 3 days earlier, a confidential document had arrived in my office in Seattle. It concerned the proposed sale of Mercer Glassworks, the company my family had owned for nearly 60 years. The sale was valued at $48 million. Buried among the financial statements and ownership records was a patent transfer agreement bearing my signature. According to that agreement, I had surrendered the rights to a heat-resistant glass formula I developed when I was 25. There was only one problem. I had never signed it. My brother continued holding up his glass, waiting for me to respond. The old Elena would have laughed politely. She would have lowered her eyes and allowed the conversation to move on. That was how I had survived my family, absorb the insult, protect the mood, and never become more inconvenient than the person hurting me. But I had not flown from Seattle to Pennsylvania to protect anyone's mood. I had come to find out who had stolen my name. I lifted my glass. "Thank you, Grant," I said. "But you're wrong about one thing," he grinned. "Only one? I'm married." The laughter died so quickly that I heard the dining room clock ticking in the hallway. My mother froze with her napkin halfway to her mouth. Grant's smile remained, but it no longer reached his eyes. My father slowly lowered his glass. "You're what?" he asked. "Married. For how long?" 7 years. No one spoke. It was the most satisfying silence I had heard in that house. My mother looked wounded before she even knew who my husband was. 7 years, she whispered. "Elena, why would you hide something like that from us?" That question told me everything. She did not ask whether I was happy. She did not ask how we met or what kind of man he was. Her first concern was that I had kept information from the family. As though privacy were betrayal, as though access to my life were something they owned, Grant leaned forward. "What's his name?" "Daniel." "Daniel what?" "Daniel Vale." "What does he do?" "He works in finance." That was technically true. Daniel was a senior partner at Vale Morrow Capital, an investment firm managing several $billion in industrial and technology assets. His name appeared in business journals often enough that Grant would find him the moment he searched. I could almost see my brother memorizing the details. "Why isn't he here?" my father demanded. "He had business in London." My mother reached across the table and covered my hand with hers. "We would have welcomed him." I looked into her eyes and wondered if she genuinely believed that. My family had spent years making jokes about my work, my clothes, my apartment, my decision not to have children, and the possibility that no man would ever tolerate me. Anything I valued became either a target or a resource. Daniel was the only part of my life they had never been allowed to touch. "I wanted something that belonged only to me," I said. Grant laughed, but there was no amusement in it now. "Well, this holiday keeps getting more interesting." He had no idea. The real surprise was waiting in a locked cabinet inside the company headquarters less than 4 miles away. To understand why the forged agreement mattered, you need to understand what happened 11 years earlier. Mercer Glassworks was founded by my grandfather in 1968. It began as a modest factory producing windows, bottles, and commercial panels. By the time I finished university, the company was failing. Cheap imports had taken most of its ordinary business. 2 major clients had left. The furnaces were old, the debts were growing, and my father had mortgaged part of the factory property without telling my mother. At 25, I was working in materials engineering at a research laboratory in Pittsburgh. I spent my weekends at the Mercer factory because, despite everything, I still wanted to save it. I believed families could be repaired through effort. That belief cost me more than I understood at the time. For 6 months, I worked after hours in an unused testing room behind Furnace 3. I was trying to create architectural glass that could tolerate sudden temperature changes without becoming thick, cloudy, or impossibly expensive. After 41 failed samples, I found the right combination. The formula produced glass suitable for hospitals, laboratories, commercial kitchens, and high-temperature industrial environments. It was clearer than the competing products and cheaper to manufacture. I called it MX42. The first successful sheet came out of the furnace at 2:13 on a February morning. I wrote the date and my initials on the corner before it cooled, EM. Nobody applauded. Nobody even knew I was still in the building. But that formula saved Mercer Glassworks. Within 18 months, we secured 3 hospital contracts and a licensing deal with a European construction supplier. Workers who had expected layoffs kept their jobs. The factory expanded. My father appeared in a regional business magazine beside a headline calling him the man who reinvented American glass. My name appeared once in the article. I was identified as his daughter. I told myself that recognition did not matter. The company survived, and that was enough. When my father began referring to MX42 as our family formula, I did not correct him. When Grant joined the company and claimed he had helped commercialize it, I remained silent. I moved to Seattle and built a career of my own. Over the next decade, I developed safety glazing for research facilities, transit stations, and museums. I became good at my work, good enough that companies hired me to inspect products before acquisitions. That was how the Mercer sale reached me. A private equity buyer called Northbridge Industrial wanted an independent technical assessment of Mercer Glassworks. The work came through another consultancy, so my family did not know I had seen the documents. I immediately declared that I was related to the owners and refused the assignment. Before the file was transferred, however, I saw my name on the intellectual property schedule. I opened the supporting agreement. It claimed that 6 years earlier I had transferred all ownership of MX42 to Mercer Glassworks for $10 and other valuable consideration. The signature looked convincing. Almost whoever copied it had made the first stroke of the E too straight. My real signature tilted slightly upward before descending at the end. The forged version sat perfectly on the line, careful and controlled. It looked like my name written by someone afraid of making a mistake. The date was even more revealing. The agreement claimed I had signed it in Pennsylvania on September 17, 6 years earlier. On that day, I had been in Singapore presenting research at an international engineering conference. I had my passport stamps, airline records, hotel invoices, presentation photographs, and video of the lecture. Someone had not merely misunderstood my intentions. Someone had deliberately created a legal document and placed my identity on it. The morning after our family dinner, I drove to the factory. Mercer Glassworks had changed since my last visit. The reception area now had polished concrete floors, steel-framed photographs, and a glowing display featuring samples of MX42. A bronze plaque beneath the display read, "Developed by Mercer Glassworks Innovation through 3 generations." My name did not appear anywhere. Several representatives from Northbridge were touring the facility. My father walked with them, speaking confidently, while Grant followed with a tablet. "All intellectual property is fully owned by the company," my father said. "No outside claims, no licensing complications. Everything is clean." Clean, the word settled inside me like a piece of broken glass. My father spotted me near the display. "Elena, I didn't expect you here." I wanted to see the old place. He put an arm around me and introduced me as our wandering scientist. Grant gave me a warning look. One of the Northbridge representatives, a woman named Victoria Shaw, studied me with sudden interest. "Are you involved in the technical side of the business?" "Not anymore," Grant answered before I could speak. "Elena left years ago." Victoria looked at me rather than him. "Didn't you contribute to the original thermal glass research?" The question made Grant's jaw tighten. "I developed the base formula," I said. My father laughed too loudly. "Everyone contributed in those days. That is the beauty of a family business." Victoria nodded, but I saw her make a note. Later, I casually asked Grant whether I could review the patent records. His expression hardened. "Why?" "Professional curiosity. You don't work here. I created MX42, and then you left." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You can't disappear for 11 years and return just as we're closing the biggest deal in company history. People might think you want a share of the money." "I'm not asking for money." "Then stop acting like this concerns you." Behind him, my mother entered carrying a tray of pastries for the visitors. She caught the tension but not the conversation. Whatever he said, he was probably joking, she told me. Grant smiled. The spell had been spoken, he was joking, therefore I was unreasonable if I objected. That sentence had erased every insult of my childhood. Now it was being used to guard a multi-million-dollar lie. I smiled back at him. "You're right," I said. "It's none of my business." Grant relaxed. That was his mistake. An hour later, I found Samuel Ortiz behind the loading bay. Samuel had worked at the factory since I was 12. He had taught me how to inspect a furnace seal and had stayed late during my early experiments. "You shouldn't be here," he said quietly. "Neither should my signature." His eyes moved toward the security camera. "So you saw it? You knew?" "I knew something was wrong. Your father told the lawyers you signed everything years ago. I remembered you saying you'd never give up the formula without a licensing agreement." "Where is the original?" Samuel hesitated. Then he led me through the quality control department to a small conference room being used for due diligence. Boxes of copied contracts stood against one wall. The intellectual property binder was on the table. Samuel remained near the door while I found the agreement. Seeing a scanned copy in Seattle had shocked me. Holding the original was different. The page had weight. It had an embossed notary seal and a witness signature. The notary was Lorraine Phelps, my mother's closest friend. I photographed the front, the reverse side, the seal, and the metadata label attached by the company's lawyers. Then I examined the ink beneath a desk lamp. The signature was blue. My father had asked me to sign dozens of company Christmas cards in blue ink when I was 29. He had kept several blank cards after I returned to Seattle, a perfect collection of samples. I closed the binder and returned it exactly as I had found it. "Are you going to stop the sale?" Samuel asked. "I don't know yet," he nodded. "Just remember something. If the truth damages the company, the person who tells it isn't necessarily the one who caused the damage." It sounded obvious. Inside my family, it was revolutionary. That evening, I helped my mother prepare dinner. I needed to know how much she knew, and my mother spoke most freely when her hands were occupied. "I saw some old legal documents today," I said while slicing vegetables. "Apparently, I transferred MX-42 to the company. She kept washing lettuce. Your father handled all of that." "I don't remember signing anything." "You were busy then, always traveling." Her answer came too quickly. "Did Dad sign for me?" She turned off the water. For several seconds, she stared at the sink. Then she sighed as though I were creating difficulty over a harmless detail. "He said it was what you would have wanted." My knife stopped against the cutting board. "What I would have wanted. The formula saved the company. It belongs here." "That isn't what I asked." "Alina, please don't turn this into something ugly. Your father took care of paperwork that should have been completed years earlier." "With my signature?" She wiped her hands. "Families do things for one another." "Did Lorraine notarize it?" My mother's face changed. That was enough. "She was helping," she whispered. "No one profited personally. The company is being sold for $48 million, which protects everyone who works there." She touched my arm. "Your father believed you had abandoned your claim. You never asked for royalties. You never complained." That sentence struck harder than the forgery. My silence had been interpreted as permission. I left the kitchen and found my father in his study. He did not deny it. "Of course I signed it," he said. "It had to be done. You forged my name." I completed a family document. "You copied my signature and had it falsely notarized." His mouth tightened. "You created MX-42 using this company's furnaces, materials, and employees. I purchased the research materials myself. I developed it while I was employed elsewhere. You know that. You developed it because you were raised here. That doesn't give you ownership." He stood, planting both hands on his desk. "You left us." Grant stayed. "I spent years turning your experiment into a product. And now you're selling something you don't own." His expression became almost pitying. "You sound like a lawyer. I sound like the person whose name you stole." He walked to the window. For the first time, he seemed older than I remembered. "My father did the same thing to me," he said. I said nothing. "The first furnace control system I designed went into the company's name. He never asked. I was furious for years. Eventually, I understood. Individual recognition is a luxury. The family name survives because each generation contributes something. You were robbed, so you decided to rob me." He turned sharply. "I made you part of something larger than yourself. You erased me. I saved the company." His voice shook the glass doors of the bookcase. Then he lowered it. "The sale closes in 2 days. If you cause trouble now, Northbridge walks. Hundreds of people could lose their jobs. Your mother's retirement is tied to the deal. Grant has 2 children." Are you prepared to destroy all of that because of a signature? There it was. He placed the entire company on my shoulders as though I had forged the document. As though telling the truth would be the destructive act. My family had always given me the same role: carry what other people refused to carry, then feel guilty if I became tired. I looked at my father and understood something unsettling. He did not believe he was a criminal. He believed theft became honorable when committed for the family. I want the false agreement removed, I said. That won't happen. Then I'll tell the buyer. His eyes turned cold. If this company collapses, everyone will know why. No, I said. They'll know how. I left before he could answer. I sat in my rental car outside the factory for nearly an hour. Daniel's name was on my phone screen. One call from him could have changed everything. Vale Morrow had business relationships with firms connected to Northbridge. Daniel could probably have delayed the acquisition, introduced a replacement buyer, or arranged financing that kept Mercer Glassworks in family hands. I imagined walking back into the house after saving them. Grant would no longer mock me. My father would finally have to respect me. My mother would call me the daughter who rescued everyone. For a few dangerous minutes, I wanted that victory. Then I recognized it. It was another version of the same trap. My father used power to bury inconvenient facts. If I asked Daniel to interfere, I would be doing exactly what my father had done, replacing truth with influence. I turned off the phone. The next morning, I contacted an intellectual property attorney named Priya Desai. I sent her the patent history, the photographs, and evidence showing that I had been in Singapore. She called me within 2 hours. If the facts are as you described, the assignment is invalid, she said. A forged signature cannot transfer ownership. So I still own the formula. Potentially, yes, subject to reviewing employment records and any other agreements. But the document they're relying upon does not establish a valid transfer. What happens to the sale? The buyer cannot safely acquire intellectual property with a disputed chain of title. They'll either suspend the transaction, remove MX42 from it, or negotiate directly with you. And my father? The forgery and false notarization may have civil and criminal consequences. You do not need to threaten anyone. State the facts and preserve the evidence. Her advice was calm and almost painfully simple. I did not need revenge. I only needed to stop cooperating. That afternoon, my family began treating me differently. My mother repeatedly asked whether I was comfortable. Grant brought me coffee without making a joke. My father offered me a glass of whiskey from a bottle he normally reserved for important guests. They had realized I could interfere with the sale, but they did not yet know about Daniel. Grant discovered that part before dinner. He entered the guest room without knocking, holding his phone. Daniel Vale, he asked. I continued folding a sweater. Yes. As in Vale Morrow Capital? Yes. His face transformed. For years, Grant had regarded me as the unsuccessful sibling. Now he was trying to calculate how much access to my husband might be worth. Why didn't you tell us? Because this is exactly what I didn't want. What? That look. He ignored me. Daniel's firm has stakes in manufacturing groups. They know everyone involved in deals like ours. He could make one call to Northbridge. No. You haven't even heard what I was going to suggest. You were going to suggest using my husband to make the ownership problem disappear. Grant lowered his voice. We're talking about the future of this family. We're talking about a forged document. Dad made a mistake. A mistake is entering the wrong date. He copied my signature and arranged a false notarization. You weren't using the patent. That doesn't make it his. Grant stared at me with open frustration. You always do this. Do what? Act like you're morally superior. I almost laughed. Only in my family could refusing to validate fraud be interpreted as arrogance. By dinner, everyone knew who Daniel was. My father suddenly wanted to hear about my marriage. My mother asked what foods Daniel enjoyed. Grant's wife suggested we all take a family holiday together. 7 years of marriage had not interested them when they believed Daniel was an ordinary financial advisor. 7 minutes after discovering his position, they wanted him at the center of the family. My father eventually made the request. Have Daniel speak with Northbridge. No, he doesn't need to interfere. He can simply reassure them. About what? That any ownership concerns can be resolved. They can be resolved. You acknowledge the forgery, remove the false document, and negotiate a legitimate license with me. Grant struck the table with his palm. Do you hear yourself? You want to charge your own family for a formula created in our factory? I offered the company a free license 11 years ago. Dad rejected a written agreement because he said paperwork showed a lack of trust. My father looked away. I had almost forgotten that conversation. At 25, I had proposed a simple arrangement. The company could use MX42 without royalties, but I would retain ownership. My father had become offended. A Mercer doesn't need a contract with another Mercer, he had told me. Apparently, contracts were unnecessary only until he needed one with my forged signature. My father pushed a document across the table. It was a new transfer agreement, dated that day. "Sign this," he said. "It corrects the technical problem." I read it. The agreement assigned every right to MX42 to Mercer Glassworks permanently. In exchange, I would receive $1. "You want me to make the forgery legally true. I want you to protect what you helped create." My mother's eyes filled with tears. "Please, Elena, don't let one old piece of paper tear us apart." The paper had not torn us apart. It had merely revealed where the tears already were. I placed the agreement back on the table. "I need time." Grant opened his mouth, but my father stopped him. "Tomorrow morning," he said. "The closing begins at 10. I took the unsigned agreement with me. That night, I called Daniel. I stood on the back porch while cold rain tapped against the roof. Beyond the garden, the dark outline of the factory chimneys rose above the town. I told him everything. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he asked, "What do you want?" Not "how can I fix it?" Not "whom should I call?" "What do you want?" "I want my name back," I said. "And I want the truth recorded." "Then that's what you should do." "Grant wants you to contact Northbridge." "That would be inappropriate. Vale Morrow has co-invested with one of Northbridge's affiliates. I'll notify our compliance team and recuse myself from anything connected to the acquisition." Relief moved through me. My family saw relationships as tools. Daniel understood that integrity sometimes required putting a tool down.
"I'm sorry this may cost you your family,"
he said. "It may only cost me the idea of them." After the call, I drafted a factual statement for Northbridge and its legal advisors. I wrote that I had developed MX42. I wrote that I had never executed the transfer agreement, dated September 17. I listed the evidence establishing that I had been in Singapore. I confirmed that I did not ratify the false agreement and reserved all legal rights connected with the formula. There were no accusations or emotional declarations. The facts were severe enough without decoration. I printed the letter and signed it with my real signature. Shortly before dawn, my mother entered my room. She sat beside me on the bed. "You were always the strong one," she said. "Grant needed more attention. Your father needed someone who wouldn't challenge him. You could manage on your own." What she intended as praise sounded like a confession. She stroked my hand. "This family depends on you now. Please sign the agreement. Ask Daniel to help. Be the person you have always been. The person who absorbs everything. The person who holds us together." I looked at her carefully. "Mom, if the family can only stay together by erasing me, then I'm not holding a family together. I'm holding a lie together. He's your father, I know. Can't you forgive him?" "I can forgive him without giving him my signature." She pulled her hand away. For a moment, I saw anger beneath her sadness. She had expected my forgiveness to restore the arrangement. To her, forgiveness meant removing consequences so everyone could return to comfort. But forgiveness was not consent, it was not ownership. And it was not a blank space where someone else could write my name. The closing took place in the factory's glass-walled conference room. The Northbridge team arrived at 9:30. Victoria Shaw sat beside two attorneys and a financial advisor. Boxes of records lined the wall. My father wore his best navy suit. Grant stood beside a presentation screen. My mother sat near the window, twisting a handkerchief. No one had invited me. I entered anyway. Grant moved toward me. "This is a private meeting. I'm the inventor of the principal technology being sold." Victoria looked up. She should stay. My father's smile tightened. He began the meeting with a speech about legacy, loyalty, and 3 generations of Mercer innovation. He described MX42 as the achievement that had transformed the company. Not once did he say my name. When he finished, one of the attorneys opened the intellectual property binder. "We need to confirm one final item," she said. "The original inventor is required to acknowledge the transfer agreement and confirm that no ownership dispute exists." My father turned toward me with a warm, practiced expression. "Elena can confirm it." Grant placed the new agreement before me. A silver pen rested across the signature line. All I had to do was sign. The sale would proceed. The company would survive in its current form. Employees would receive retention bonuses. My parents would retire comfortably, Grant would become a wealthy man, and I would officially surrender the work that had saved them. My father leaned closer. "Go ahead, sweetheart." His voice carried the confidence of a man who had spent decades watching me choose peace over myself. I picked up the pen, my mother exhaled, then I placed it beside the agreement. "I can't confirm the transfer," I said. Nobody moved. "The document in your binder contains a signature that is represented as mine. I did not write it." Victoria's expression sharpened. The attorney closed the binder halfway. My father tried to interrupt. "Alina is confused about—" "I am not confused." I removed my letter and the supporting evidence from the envelope. "The agreement is dated September 17, 6 years ago. On that date, I was attending an engineering conference in Singapore. These records include my passport entry, flight itinerary, hotel invoice, conference program, and photographs of me delivering a presentation that afternoon." I slid the documents toward the attorneys. "I did not assign MX42 to Mercer Glassworks. I do not ratify the document, and I will not sign a replacement agreement to conceal how the original was created." The silence was complete, then Grant rushed to my chair. "Call Daniel," he whispered. "Before they leave, call him." My father heard him and seized the idea. "There's no reason to overreact," he told Victoria. "Alina's husband is Daniel Vale. His firm has significant resources. We could restructure the transaction or bring in additional investment." Victoria looked at me. "Is Vale Morrow involved?" "No. Daniel has disclosed a potential conflict and recused himself. I will not use my marriage to bury an ownership dispute." My father's composure finally broke. "You ungrateful child." The Northbridge attorneys exchanged glances. "Robert," my mother whispered. But he could no longer stop. "This company paid for your education. It gave you every opportunity you ever had. Now you're willing to destroy it over a piece of paper." "No," I said. "The piece of paper was created because you believed I would stay silent. The Mercer name comes first." His hand struck the conference table. Water trembled in every glass. I looked at the man who had taught me that love was measured by what I surrendered. "The truth comes first," I said. "The name was only what you used when you wanted my silence." For the first time in my life, my father had no answer. My mother covered her mouth, then she turned toward him, not toward me. Even after everything had been exposed, she chose the familiar lie. I had expected it, but expectation did not reduce the pain. Victoria ended the meeting. "Northbridge is suspending the transaction pending a complete review of the intellectual property chain of title." Grant stared at me as though I had pulled down the factory with my hands. But I had done nothing dramatic. I had not threatened anyone. I had not demanded $48 million. I had not used Daniel's influence or asked Northbridge to punish my family. I had only refused to sign. That was enough because the entire transaction had been built on the assumption that I eventually would. The following months were difficult. Northbridge withdrew from the acquisition. The false transfer agreement was referred to outside counsel. Lorraine Phelps admitted that she had notarized the document without witnessing my signature because my father assured her it was family paperwork. My father avoided criminal prosecution after a negotiated resolution, but the company paid substantial legal fees and penalties. He was required to acknowledge that the assignment was invalid. MX42 remained mine. Mercer Glassworks did not collapse, although Grant told everyone it would. The company sold an unused warehouse, reduced executive salaries, and abandoned an unnecessary expansion plan. I offered a 5-year license for MX42 at a modest royalty, provided the company listed me as the inventor and paid employees before distributing family bonuses. Grant called the terms humiliating. The workers called them fair. Samuel kept his job. A year later, a smaller industrial group invested in Mercer Glassworks. The deal was worth far less than Northbridge's offer, but it was based on assets the company actually owned and agreements signed by the people whose names appeared on them. My father never apologized. He tells relatives that I nearly destroyed the family business out of greed. In his version, the forged agreement was an administrative shortcut, and my refusal to validate it was the true betrayal. I stopped arguing with his version. Some people protect their innocence by rewriting the injury. My mother and I speak several times a year. Our conversations are polite and shallow. She asks about the weather, Daniel's travels, and whether I am eating properly. She has never asked what it felt like to discover that my own father had copied my signature. Grant surprised me, not immediately. For nearly 8 months, he sent angry messages about legal expenses. Lost bonuses and the damage I had done to the Mercer reputation. I answered none of them. Then, one evening, he called. His 13-year-old daughter, Sophie, had designed a water filtration system for a school competition. Grant wanted to submit it to a manufacturer in the company's name. She built it, I said, so any agreement should identify her as the inventor. She's a child. So was I in Dad's eyes. Grant became silent. A week later, he sent me a copy of the submission form. Sophie Mercer was listed as the sole inventor. Grant never apologized, but perhaps an apology is not always the first sign that a pattern has broken. Sometimes the first sign is a blank line where a stolen name would once have appeared. Daniel and I no longer hide our marriage. When I returned to Seattle, I placed our wedding photograph on my office shelf. For years, I had protected my happiness by making it invisible. I thought secrecy kept it safe. In reality, I had allowed my family's behavior to determine how openly I lived. I would not do that anymore. The original MX-42 sample now hangs in my laboratory. After the ownership dispute was resolved, Samuel found it in a storage crate marked for disposal. The glass is slightly cloudy at one corner, and my initials are still visible beneath the date, EM. 2 letters written by a tired 25-year-old woman at 2:13 in the morning. Visitors usually notice the plaque first. It identifies the formula, the year of development, and my full name, but I always look at those small initials. They remind me that the truth existed even when nobody displayed it. Ownership did not disappear because my family ignored it. My work remained mine, and my voice remained mine, waiting for the day I stopped offering both in exchange for peace. For most of my life, my family called me strong. I once believed that was a compliment. Now I understand that strong can become a dangerous word when people use it to describe the person from whom they expect endless sacrifice. You are strong, so you can tolerate another insult. You are strong, so you do not need recognition. You are strong, so you can carry the consequences of someone else's choices. You are strong, so please disappear one more time. Real strength was not carrying everything they placed on me. It was finally putting it down. I forgave my father because I no longer wanted to live inside my anger. But I did not rescue him from the consequences of his decision. I did not let forgiveness become another document he could sign on my behalf. That is the difference my family never understood. Forgiveness may release the past. It does not surrender the future. And it never requires you to sign your name beneath the lie that erased you.